not that cold in here, but I'm telling you, it's gotta be like 50 degrees inside in here. That's not good.
How was your Columbus con?
I loved it.
Yeah,
I
was
loved it.
it
I had a really good
at
time.
that convention center right downtown?
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, we always do Hell City, which is the tattoo convention there,
Uh-huh.
and it's always right in that same
Yeah.
convention center. Yeah.
I liked it. I mean, it was a great location. We walked around a bunch even though it was, like, 15 degrees. I just bundled up and, yeah, really enjoyed it.
There's
Like,
a bunch of
I
fun
um
restaurants right there.
yeah. And then we walked to Germantown, and there was, like, a little
Okay.
Christmas market going on there,
Yeah,
and there are all these, like, little bands playing outside, like, you know, like, playing Christmas music and carolers and stuff. It was so cute.
that's
I was like,
awesome.
"I guess I
Columbus,
love Columbus, Ohio. Who knew?"
I love Columbus actually, and
Yeah.
Columbus is a really heavily tattooed city. It's almost
Yeah.
strange when you're there. There's so like I mean, everybody's got like full sleeves, and
It's
you're
true, I
just
saw a lot of sleeves. That's a really good
there's
point.
a lot of full sleeves there, which you
Yeah.
don't see normally. As I say
Yeah.
that, I realize I have two, and Bob has two, and
I
we're
know.
always on here. But
No,
typically,
yeah.
typically if you're in a town and you see somebody that's heavily tattooed, they usually like they're like, oh, my friend tattoos or my
Right.
somebody. But there, it's just like
That's what you do.
just get tattooed.
Yeah. Yeah, I
I feel like
liked
it's
it. I
getting
thought
more
it
and
was
more
very good.
common though.
It is, but I mean, it's been that way for 15 years of going to Columbus. Like every time you go to
Yeah.
Columbus, people are
They were
just
ahead of
super
it.
heavily tattooed. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's cool.
You were saying something about the temperature when it went out. The other thing that fun little story is, did I tell you last week that I finally have like I've talked about for years my saga of the pond that I've been trying to build in the back of
Oh,
my
yeah.
property. There's been a mud pit. Well, I finally in September got a hold of a contractor and was like, "Listen, I've spent too much time and years and
Yeah.
energy and money
Yeah.
on this to have a quarter-acre giant mud pit. I need to make this a pond." So I got a hold of a contractor to come in and clean it out and put a plastic liner and a rubber liner in it.
Okay.
And so I will have an actual pond.
Cool. No,
Um,
you've been sitting on that. I didn't know that. That's great.
yeah. So this was in September, and I was like, yeah, and he gave me a quote and everything because it's a big deal. Like I mean, the pond's 120 feet across and it's
Yeah.
14 feet deep. It's
Yeah.
huge. So that's a big piece of rubber that's
Yeah,
going
no
over this
kidding.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he gives me the
Let's call
quote.
it what it is. It's a crater right now.
Not right now. It's not. But I told him then I was like, well, can we do this? So Zach helped me with this. That was that very unflattering picture of Zach.
Uh-huh.
I trenched in from my sprinkler system off the main line. I ran a water line all the way back to, and I have 5 acres and it's in the very back of my property.
Yeah.
So all the way back there. So back then when I was digging the pond, so I'll have water there. I can fill it if it gets low in the summer or whatever.
Yeah.
So I can have water back there. So, but that's attached to my sprinkler system. So it gets blown out in the fall when the sprinkler system gets blown out, because you might not know this in California, but us northerners, you got to get the water out the hoses, out the pipes before the ground freezes. Otherwise
Yes.
your whole system will break.
Got it.
So when I talked to the contractor in September, I was like, can you do this and have it done by the end of October?
Mhm.
So I can use that line to fill up the pond.
Yeah.
And he's like, absolutely.
Uh-huh.
This son of a
Uh,
So October comes and goes. I'm like, you coming out? Yeah. And then he wouldn't answer me, and I couldn't get a hold of him. And finally I was like, dude, I have to blow out my sprinklers by into November. I have no choice.
yeah.
So if we're gonna wait till spring, whatever. And he's like, go ahead and blow the sprinklers out. We've got ways to fill it. Fine. So I had my guy come out and blow the sprinklers out. December comes, and I ran into him at Walmart, and I'm like, what are you because he's not great at answering, and he's a friend of mine.
Yeah.
He's not great at answering texts either. And I'm
Mhm.
like, dude, I genuinely at this point don't care.
Yeah.
I would just like to know,
Uh-huh.
because I would like to put a plow on my truck,
Yeah.
but I have this much money and it can either
Yeah.
be plow
Yeah.
or pond. And if
Yeah.
the pond's not going to be until the spring, then I'll put the plow on and I'll resave the money until then. He's like, no. He's actually, we're gonna come out next week. It's fucking snowing at the time. He's like, we're gonna come
Mhm.
out next week. Snowed up. We've had other stuff going. We can work in the cold and we can get it all done. So they came out and they dug it all out,
Oh.
put the liner in, and we start
No.
filling it. I'm like, how are we filling it? And he's like, well, you got a garden hose is still on, right? We'll just
What?
run hose all the way back there.
What?
And I'm like,
What?
again, 120 foot around
Oh,
across,
no.
14 feet deep. I'm like, yeah. But he's like, well, we'll use like 1-inch sprinkler pipe and just hook the hose into that and then run that all the way out there. And then we'll just fill it. It'll take a week or so to fill it. I'm like, it'll take longer than that. And so we end up, I showed him where the line was that goes out there that's beyond all the sprinkler stuff.
Uh-huh.
And we dug that up and cut it and then just ran an adapter to run the hose into that. So it will run all the way down to the
Oh, okay.
But there was the firefighter coming out of me. I'm like, you understand friction loss. So even though that's a 1-inch pipe, it's coming out of a 1/2-inch pipe and you got this much length and you got friction loss. It's going to cut down your gallons per minute. We're going to get about 2 gallons a minute out of that all the way down there.
No.
It's going to take years to fill this thing.
Uh-huh.
So after like 3 or 4 days of it, it just was like, it had filled up like 2 feet.
Oh,
And it can't run though, because I have a well. So it's not like I can run it out. Like you got to like every few hours, you got to shut it off and let the aquifer refill and let the well pump cool off. So then this weekend I got the brilliant idea. I ended up going back. It's such a fucking disaster right now. I went to where my sprinkler pipe, which is like a big 1.25-inch pipe, comes out of the house,
Mm-hmm.
and cut that off and then put an adapter on that and then ran a 1.5-inch pipe from there up to where we had made the splice in the other spot so it can get the full. But now she's filling up now.
Okay. All right.
But now the problem is we had and the reason I was so hot to try to get that done Saturday is because it's been in the 40s.
Uh-huh.
So like I didn't have to blow it out. But now the temperature is dropping below freezing again, which means I can run it for a few hours. But when I shut it off, I have to hook the air compressor up to it and blow all the water out of the line while it waits between cycles. And then I got to turn it back on. So that just made me think of that when you said it. So I'm like timing now and watching the temperature because my plan is I can run it for about 8 hours. So I want to run it overnight tonight. It's going to get below freezing. So I want to run it overnight because it won't freeze while it's running. Let it run. And then in the morning when it's back above freezing, I'll shut the well off or shut the pipe off when I go to work. Rinse and repeat. But it's been a fun little juggle. But the point is, when this is over with, I'm going to have a beautiful, glorious pond in the backyard. And my family, who's been bugging me about a swimming pool since we moved into this place, told like it's not a pool, but what it is, it's a pond with a rubber liner, which is basically a pool.
Uh-huh.
Because it's clean water. There's no
mosquitoes.
dirt in it at all.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Plus, it's way bigger than a pool, way deeper than a pool.
Yeah.
And it costs $6,000 instead of $50,000. So
great.
Everybody wins.
Everybody wins.
And all that to tell you, all the more
Just
reason.
like the raccoons, like Susan said, the raccoons can go and dabble all the food they steal from you. They can dabble it.
Oh, that was the other thing. So it's a rubber liner that's pretty steep. Like one side of it has like a nice like shelf on it because I'm going to put fish and stuff in it. So I need a spot where they can like bed and I can put plants and stuff in there. But the rest of it, like probably 2/3 of it, is just a straight slope down.
Yeah. And
it's rubber. And there's water in the middle of it. And the deer have always drank. Either they go down into it to drink when it was a mud pit.
Uh-huh.
And so I'm like, we can't leave. If a deer tries to go down there and drink out of that, it's going to slip down into it and never be able to get out.
Correct.
Ever.
Yeah.
So I've also made them every day when they're done working out there, they have to put up a snow fence all the way around.
Good.
So
Good. Oh my God.
It's like,
That's
I'm
like
not
a Far
dragging the
Side
dead deer out of
cartoon,
it.
watching a bunch of deer like, wee! Oh shit.
Yeah. I feel you. Two girls said that the well pump uses electricity, so when they get out of power, it could be scary.
Yeah.
We a couple years ago, I installed a whole generator system in my house and the only thing that runs my heater and the well pump, and then like the refrigerators and freezer, because you can't run your whole house on it. But yeah, because the first time our power went out here, it's like, oh, we can't flush the toilet. That's fun.
Yeah, that's intense.
Yep.
Okay. 10 after. All right.
I have the right microphone. I had to check.
Good work.
The right
I have
microphone?
I have another one right here.
Oh, we'll just use them both just in case. All right, we ready to start this thing?
Yeah, but only one's plugged in. That's the issue.
Oh, gotcha. Hang on.
That is a little bit of a.
I could use the other one, but it's going to be. I would use
the one that's plugged in. I would. That's just me. I would use the one that's plugged in.
My daughter just sent me a screenshot. She just got her final report card from her freshman year of college. She finished her first semester of her freshman year with a 3.79 GPA.
Ooh, that is awesome. Killing it. Good job, Ella.
I don't know what that means.
Amazing. Means she got all A's and 1 B.
Oh, grounded.
Fantastic.
Fucking bees.
Right. I'm not paying for bees.
Oh, no.
All right. I'm going to end this pregame show. Pregamers, we love you guys. Thank you, patrons, for all of your love, engagement,
Pre-gamers.
and support.
Hey, Ribble?
Yeah.
Molly Ribble? Is
Correct.
that the name?
That's
Okay.
the name.
I don't want to just say this the wrong.
I am so relieved we got that in for the pregame.
Bye,
My bad.
pregamers. Why are you waving? They can't hear you wave, dumbass.
Just end it there. That's perfect.
Great.
Why are you waving?
Great.
They can't
great.
hear you wave, dumbass.
Erica
Oh,
always enjoys
no.
that's figuring out what the spot I decided was the last words for people to hear.
Mhm. Yeah, so many great choices.
Mm-hmm. All right, so now all three of us are going to record. We're all going to do a clap. Zach gets to play the clap game today.
Exciting.
when to hit the button. I gotta hit the button.
Rolling.
Rolling.
I touched the button.
1, 2, 3. Perfect.
Clap game. Clap game. That's right, Jennifer. Clap game.
Ahoy, friends. Thank you for joining.
Nope.
Ahoy, friends. God damn it. Here we go. Sorry, Erica. Ahoy, friends. Thank you for joining. Man.
No, thank you for tuning us.
Or Julying us or Augusting us, whatever you want to do.
I can't get out of the first sentence. This is not going to go well. Ahoy, friends. Thank you for tuning in to Truth and Justice. You are listening to the Friday follow-up for Season 15, Episode 22, A Different Perspective. This week, Bob was joined by listener Molly Ribble as they had a civil conversation about guilty or innocent in the case. Holy cow. In the case of Jody Hill. We have a lot of questions this week, and I'm joined by Bob and Janet. But before we get into that, do we have any housekeeping?
Nothing real pressing. The only housekeeping is I just want to remind everybody that we are, after this episode, we're off for a week. We're taking the week off for the holidays, so there will not be a main episode on Sunday, nor will there be a follow-up next Friday. The next episode you'll hear will be on Sunday, the 29th, will be our next main episode. And
do you know
also,
who that confuses the most? Me.
Right.
I'm the one that always has the questions.
Right. Right. Zach doesn't understand how calendars work. We do have, I do want to point out, I meant to talk about this in the pregame, but I can tell you guys now, I have spoken with Peggy from the podcast you mentioned last week, Janet.
Mm-hmm.
And we are going to sit down and do an interview. She's
cool.
she's still working on that case and another case. So she said probably like in January. So sometime coming in January, Peggy though is going to be coming on the show. So we've been chatting.
Very cool. Oh, that's exciting. That'll
be coming up. And we also are going to have a West Memphis 3 episode coming up very soon, just waiting on one little piece of that puzzle to come together. I'm hoping that perhaps we can do that by the 29th, but that's kind of up in the air when we come back. So that's what we got coming. Other than that, we're off next week. We're going to be taking the week off. Zach and I will be enjoying time at home with our families. Janet will be working 16 hours a day getting ready for Sketchfest. So it'll be great for everybody.
Yeah. No, I'm going to Texas. We'll get some fam time with Brandon's family.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So that being said, I don't think there's any other housekeeping. What were your guys' thoughts on the episode?
JV, if you want to go first this time.
Sure. I thought it was great, and I definitely want to applaud and thank Molly for coming on. It was really helpful for me. You know, it's funny because when I was reading the follow-up posts, you know, there was really positive comments from folks, and people were saying, you know, so great to get a different perspective or to kind of hash some stuff out. And there was definitely a moment where I was like, I mean, I guess that is what Zach and I are also supposed to bring to the table when we do the follow-ups.
But I feel like I successfully
inspired.
Convinced you guys that Jody's innocent.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But no, I mean, it was great to hear where some of the kind of speed bumps were and where, you know, it's a bit of an agree to disagree. I thought that it actually did bring out some clarifications that maybe I didn't even realize were as confusing as they could have been perceived to be. And there was stuff that like was really helpful for me to hear again. I thought because Molly was kind of pointing out, like, wait, so when within the timeline, when does this end up in the file, and who had it and who didn't?
Right.
And the more convoluted that gets, not by your doing, by just by virtue of what the case has been, you can see where those kind of like holes are that you need to be accounted for in some way or another. And I also thought, some really good points were made about like time frames and people's ability to pin down a certain time that they had a conversation. I thought it was really interesting that Molly thought that in her scenario, there was a potential for Jody to have left and kind of run into Mario,
Mm-hmm.
which isn't a theory that we've really heard before. But also was like perfectly willing to say, that's complete and total speculation. There's no indication that that's like what happened. Which kind of, every time we get into those conversations, I always think to myself like, well, now we're living in a place where none of the evidence suggests something, and now we're just trying to find a way that this could have gone down that isn't explained by the evidence because the evidence doesn't work. So
Right.
I thought you guys both did a really good job of saying like, yeah, and all of this being said, none of that points to this person should be in prison. I was sorry, I have a lot of notes on this, Zach. You probably shouldn't have asked me to go first, but
Oh, it's fine.
um I thought I really liked the section where you guys kind of hashed out why someone might think it was suspicious or questionable or odd that Jody had made the assumption that they did about when the murder
Mm-hmm.
happened. I thought it was really helpful to hear that perspective and go, oh, I'm so glad that you guys got to actually have a conversation instead of on Facebook, because once you, for me, here, well, again, remember, this person leaves Jody's life for the moment, goes out and does something, comes back and has this huge news. It is very, to me, in my opinion, and I can see how someone would feel differently, but it seems completely natural to me that you would go, oh God, this thing must have happened while I was asleep. Like
Right.
I didn't know
Yeah.
about it when I went to sleep, and I've waked up and it did happen. But so I enjoyed and really appreciated that part of the conversation. And I really liked Molly's perspective about where she lives and what kind of neighborhood she is experiencing, and kind of just being reminded that something that can seem logical to us or to one person, one specific person, not just to me, not even to Bob or not even to Zach and not even to Molly, it can seem logical to me because of where I'm coming from, what my experience has been,
Yes.
and what makes sense and what system I'm used to,
Mm-hmm.
and whether it works or not. And so I really, really appreciated that. And then the final thing I would say is I appreciated that Molly was like, and by the way, I don't think Jody's a monster if Jody did kill Mario. Not to say that that's what Molly walked away with, but seeing a broken system and seeing the situations that people find themselves in, understanding that there are people who commit murder who are not monsters.
Mm-hmm.
That's just there that I just think that I don't know. Again, it's not about Jody really, just about the idea that we throw away people when we put them in prison. And, I'm sure there are people laughing at me right now for me saying like somebody who kills another person is not a monster, but I don't believe that they are. I mean, some of them are, but so I thought that was a really good perspective too. Like it's not black and white.
What yeah, and for me, like what you touched on with several different conversations about the perception about, when Jody thought the murder happened, and the timesheet thing especially. One thing I just really appreciate about the whole thing was being able to have that conversation is such a different, and that's like what, every season when I'm asking someone who believes our subject is guilty to come on, like that's the conversation that I think people think that I'm trying to like trap them or debate them or whatever. Like it's literally just to have somebody come on and have a conversation to help understand where we're both coming from. And I thought
Mhm.
Molly was amazing, and she was very, very open about, her feelings about certain things, and very open about, can you help me understand, asking me, can you help me understand why you're thinking this way? And at the same time, I was getting a better perspective through conversation about why she was thinking certain things. And I just thought it was a great conversation. What do you think, Zach?
So I have to agree, and I really love that Molly came on. The one thing that I truly wish, I fall in line with a lot of what Janet said, but the one thing I truly wish, Molly did a great job. I really, really wish we had someone that would have stepped forward that was truly on the guilty side,
Yeah.
because that's the argument I wanted to hear, right? Molly did a great job asking questions, and you guys had some great conversations based on like sitting on the fence. But I wanted to hear why these guilty people think that Jody is guilty. Why
Sure.
Right.
are they still convinced that Jody is guilty? That's the conversation I wanted to hear. Not that this episode wasn't a great episode, and there was a lot to take out of it, but I wish it had been a little more of that for me because I still I believe Jody's innocent, and I have a hard time with these people that believe Jody's guilty because I haven't heard their actual argument,
It's hard
and
to,
that's
yeah, you
the
don't understand it.
so that's the conversation I wish I could have heard. Not that this wasn't a great conversation. The other thing that I realized over the course of listening to this episode was the fact that like Janet and I said like we're pretty convinced, right? Because we talk to you a lot, and because we're on this show, we are over listening to the show. We're taking notes. We're doing all these little things where sometimes not all listeners are doing that. So listeners are missing a few things here or there because there was a few little points that Molly brought up, and when you brought forth the actual evidence, it was like, oh yeah, no, that's the reason. And
Yeah, that,
and so it's you when things get missed, it convolutes the whole thing.
yeah. And the McKinney's report about what time he was called to the scene was a perfect example of that.
Exactly, and that's one of those things that like when I had listened several times. I know Janet's listened a couple times. We've taken notes, so like that timestamp was already in our head, but Molly had accidentally missed that, which is perfectly normal and perfectly fine. But that's a big piece of evidence to miss, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm with you 100% that I was so thankful for Molly because when I put that out several weeks in a row, no one. It's kind of the same thing we see every season. Everybody, they want to type on Facebook, but they don't want to come on and have a conversation.
Yeah,
And then Molly had reached out, and Molly and I had. It feels like arguing on Facebook, but we've had like discussions, arguments on Facebook a couple of times, and then she reached out and said, "Hey, I'm not convinced Jody's guilty, but I'm not convinced Jody's innocent either, and I have questions. I'd be happy to do it." And so like that was amazing because I think it made for a very productive conversation because I think that she was coming from a very honest place in her
absolutely.
in her place. Like and I always, like I said, for the people that look at this case and are like 100% no question Jody's absolutely guilty, I have a very hard time believing that someone who is looking at the case objectively thinks that or can be convinced 100% with all the problems that are out there. And it leaves me with the belief that the reason they don't want to come on and have the discussion is because they don't want to have a back and forth. They want to be able to type their points and put them all out there and try to make their case, but they don't want to have the conversation where it's like, well, yeah, but what about this? Because then that takes away from the narrative. So I think it becomes very difficult. It's a difficult proposition for someone to come on and argue, I'm sure that Jody's guilty, because I feel like they have to know that argument gets whittled away really quickly if there's a back and forth.
Yeah, I agree. And I don't want to take anything away from Molly. I think she did a phenomenal job, and everything she brought up was great. It's just that the fact that we are really deep in this, that I think I lose sight of that sometimes. That I forget that I'm way more involved in this than some other listeners. And that's why I'm aware of why I believe Jody's innocent, solely based on what's on the podcast, but because I've listened to every episode 3 fucking times.
Right,
Mhm.
right. I want to point out, so Jennifer's in the YouTube chat right now. She said she hadn't realized how confusing the provenance of the timesheet was, and the chain of custody for that is non-existent. Yeah, I meant to mention that when Janet was talking too. That was a really great part of the conversation for me because I've had back and forths with a couple of people on the Facebook page about the timesheet, and I always end up. I literally will say like, "I'm baffled. I don't understand what you're saying. Like, what do you mean? Like, are you saying it's fake?" Like, and it was in that might come across as like sarcasm for me, but it's not. I genuinely like, I don't get it. I don't get where you're coming from. So it was, I really thought it was very useful to have Molly on and be able to explain, no, this is where the questions come in because we don't know where this happened or where it came from or who had it or who had it in their possession. So I thought that was one of the better parts of the conversation. I thought was that we were able to hash that out, and people land wherever they land on it, but at least we're able to like, I think everybody's got a pretty clear perspective on where everyone's coming from regarding the timesheet now.
Mhm.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, another thing that came up on the follow-up post after the discussion was actually one of the last things that you guys talked about, which was that when Molly was talking about when McGinnis would have spoken to Jody and when the time would have been slid around and how much time did he have before he was telling people that the crime happened when it did. And then you pointed out, no, it was in the paper like right away.
Yeah.
That later time made it to the public very, very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And that actually raised some questions for people, like maybe people who hadn't thought about that as one thing or another. There was a little bit of confusion about like, well, wait a minute, why did why would he frame her so quickly, or how did he get that information so quickly? Sorry, I said her. Why would they? Sorry, I'm just thinking about it because of conversations I've had with Jody. I'm like, okay, wait, sorry, I went into full her mode. Okay, sorry, Erica. Hopefully, you can clean this up. Anyway, I think for some people in that conversation, and even me a little bit, I thought, God, yeah, that is such a fast turnaround for having to get out in front of that quickly and set that time at much later than it was. Um, can you just revisit that with us? Like
It's a
why and how? Is it because people were saying it on the street right away?
I think no, I don't know. Obviously, there's a question certainly surrounding it. My personal thoughts on it were it wasn't that they like came out right away and said we better say this is 1240 so that we could say Jody did it. I think that the newspaper article I read said the body was found at 1240. It didn't say that the original newspaper article didn't say that the murder happened at 1240. It said the body was discovered at 1240 or something like that. Um, and there's a lot of different things that could be from someone who was in public safety and reported information to the newspaper several times a week. And then every single time I read the paper the next day, they got everything I said wrong. It could have been, they could have said 1140. They could have spoke if that came from Wright, who wasn't on the scene, who was the chief. That could have been the time he thought it happened. There's a lot of different ways for that to happen. So I kind of think that probably it wasn't that, in a world, because I know there's people that don't agree with this, we'll just say like in a world where the murder happened at 11:45 or so.
And you are correct. That article does say police found his body at 12:40 a.m. Friday. Found his body.
Right. But I lost my train. What was I saying? Oh, right. So, but anyway, I think that there could be a world where like this, like in this world where we believe where the murder actually happened at 11:45. So looking at it from that, because that's how I try to approach these things. It's like, okay, so what if it did happen at 11:45? Then how did the newspaper get 12:40? If that's the case, right? It could have been as simple as that. Either the newspaper got that time wrong, or Wright was confused about what time it happened, and maybe that was the time when they first tried to call McGinnis, and that's the time it went out, or that's maybe when he got a call. Who knows? But I think it was probably more once they realized then in the morning that Jody couldn't have been there at 11:45, that they might have just, because it was in the newspaper, just said, okay, well, it already says 12:40. We'll just go with 12:40. It could be as simple as that. But I mean, I don't pretend to know why that time was in there. But it's certainly not consistent with all the evidence. And, for me, like I know it's hard for people to say, for people to just be like, well, I don't believe it's in the newspaper, it's real. But from someone who, again, who gave statements to the Herald Palladium, that newspaper, on a regular basis, and saw how often they screwed them up, I don't look at any information from the newspaper as being like, well, that's the gospel truth. That's when it happened. Right. Because they would, it got to the point where when I was the fire chief, I refused to give verbal interviews. And I started writing press releases with all the information, and would put quotes from me in the press releases, and I would email them out. So I'd be in my office at 3:00 in the morning after a house fire, and it would say, this happened, da, 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 da. And I would put quote from the chief, and then I would put in quotes exactly what I said so they could cut and paste so that they could. It was that bad how often they screwed it up that I would do it that way so that they would actually get the information correct in the paper.
Yeah. No, that's definitely a thing. It's definitely a thing. Um, let's go to Nancy. Nancy says, "I'm glad Molly lives in a similar neighborhood and is a social worker. I worry that some of the disinterest in this case we have seen from some viewers this season or listeners is a reflection of how society treats Black people in general and trans Black people especially. A lot of the reason for false convictions is police deciding that a person's life doesn't matter. So, guilty or innocent of that crime, they probably did something that deserves it. We've actually seen people say that here, that Jody should be in jail anyway for the robbery."
Yeah, I mean that's to me, like, when we talk about like a frame job, like that's what I feel happened here. I don't think that it was necessarily that we got to get Jody Hill. I think that Jody and Mario and the Mileses and everybody in that community, I think they were so inconsequential to that police department that they just literally didn't care. Like they got to the scene and people were saying Jody did it. So they're like, all right, well, let's get them then. Who cares? They're probably guilty, like you said, probably guilty of something. And then there's also this like robbery situation. So they're like, well, even if he didn't do this, he probably did that, and you could I think that it's much more that than targeting Jody for some reason.
But boy, you could sure see how when you're the person who's in that position, it would feel real personal.
Well, yeah, because again, you have to, and this is where I think I think where people get their hackles up and are unable to have genuine conversations like Molly and I had is if you don't do this thing, which is to try to look at it from two perspectives. So, like, if you can put yourself in the shoes and imagine for a moment that maybe, just maybe, Jody didn't do this. Imagine they are completely innocent of this murder and they were at work when it happened, went to bed, had no idea any of it happened. It would absolutely, and then imagine feeling like that all of a sudden seeing this police department is just manufacturing all this evidence against you to try to put you in prison for the rest of your life when you know you didn't do it. Like that's such a horrible position to be in. And yeah, you could say, even though I can look at it from the outside and be like, it really wasn't personal against Jody. They just didn't give a shit. But I bet Jody doesn't feel that way. I know Jody doesn't feel that way. They've told me, how
Yeah.
they feel and all the reasons why they think that they were targeted.
Well, I'm open to those reasons too. I just don't know. I mean, I wasn't there, and yeah, in terms of corroborating and stuff, we may not be there at this point, but um it's yeah. um Monica says, "I appreciated the fact that Molly was willing to listen and consider the additional info that Bob provided on points where she may have been missing info or had it incorrect. While she said if she was on the jury, she wouldn't have found Jody guilty, and some people are saying this defeated the purpose. I think this just highlights that she does lean towards guilty, but she's also aware enough and recognizes there wasn't enough evidence to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, which is the key."
Yeah, and I think Molly's position is the most intellectually honest position you could really have, probably more so even than me. I mean, I am privy to some other information and I look at the case a certain way, but I am convinced Jody's guilty. I have not seen any evidence to show me that there's any chance that Jody could be guilty. I would say probably a more reasonable position is where Molly is at, where she's like, if I wouldn't convict. Like she's acknowledging there's not enough evidence there to convict, but that doesn't mean I'm sure that Jody's innocent. Jody could still be guilty. And I think that's such a fair place to speak from.
Yeah. Susan said, "What I liked about this episode is the way it took all of the big questions in the season and ran them with both viewpoints of the evidence. I think it was a great exercise to sum it up. This should be a regular thing. It doesn't need to be an opposing viewpoint, just someone with legit questions who has taken good notes." Susan, this is the one I read where I was like, huh,
Yeah.
in an ideal world, Zach and I would, I guess, be doing that.
Right.
So note taken, Susan.
Right. But to the point too, where they said like where some people were saying that it defeats the purpose. Again, just to circle back on that, because I don't know if it made the list, but somebody had said that question. Like it said, like like this defeated the whole purpose. I wanted to hear somebody who was guilty, and that was somebody coming from someone who has been very vocal about believing Jody's guilty the whole time. And what I would say to them is, well, then come on, do it. Like it's not like we didn't have somebody on who believes Jody's guilty because I wouldn't let somebody on. It's because all of you that claim to be so certain that Jody's guilty won't come on and argue that. So I can't do anything about that. I can't. If I thought there was a legitimate guilty argument, I would make it and present that viewpoint. But I don't even see anything close to that. I couldn't even make something up.
Well, and what you just said is you said for someone to come on and argue that, which isn't even what you want. You just want someone to come on and have a discussion.
Well, by argue it, I mean just like, make those points.
Correct.
Julie says, I remember Richard Perry's story from the beginning. We kind of touched on this last week when we were talking about where we're going after this case. So you don't have to revisit everything you said because I thought you stated it really well last week. But Julie's still thinking about Richard Perry's story and had brought up the idea of it, being a future case. Again, you don't have to revisit the entirety of what we talked about last week, but just a reminder to folks that if you missed last week's follow-up, Bob was saying, it's not that we're walking away from Benton Harbor at all. It's just there is a lot of information that still needs to be gathered. And there's also a lot of information that would need to be gathered on cases like this that is still being kept behind the wall by the person who we're saying has done wrong and who is barring the gate to you getting that information.
Yeah. My hope is, as I said, just to sum it up, is that at the conclusion of this, my hope is that there will be a change in leadership. And I think that would open the door to solving a lot of these problems and solving a lot of these cases.
Yeah. I want to go back, Brad, I see your comment here, but I want to go back to Brad's comment from earlier. That's the last comment that we had from the actual Facebook the Facebook post. But Brad said, you should never use vague descriptions like hero, monster, evil, etc. Everybody's on a spectrum and it's always moving. Learn some actual psychology. Broken people break people. Common sense. I really enjoyed that. And I realized that I said, some people are monsters. Bear in mind, I'm thinking about people who are, it's rare, but somebody who just is real keys. I don't, I mean, I think it's, I'm not, I don't even think he was a monster, but point taken, Brad. And I completely agree with you. I shouldn't have even thrown it around. I accused people of throwing it around and then I went ahead and thrown it around at the end of my statement. So understood. I agree. And I'll go back to what I was saying, which is I agree with you. It's never that simple.
Right.
So that's all I have. Just looking to see if there's anything in the chat that, let's see. I don't think there's additional questions to touch on that we're able to touch on at this point in the chat. Do you guys have anything else?
No, I mean, it seems like we are going to have a nice short one going into our holiday break. And I'm fine with that. I'm tired. I got a lot to do. I got to go turn that water on to fill my pond up in the freezing cold. Yeah, so I think that's fine. I think we'll go ahead and wrap things up here. Thanks everybody for tuning in. I hope everyone who celebrates Christmas has a wonderful Christmas. Happy Hanukkah, happy whatever anybody likes to do. But just hope everybody has a good week and is able to spend some time with family. That's what I intend on doing. I'm gonna get some work done for one of those weeks, and then
one more time for the people that seem to forget when we're off. What's the schedule coming up?
And Zach is for the people. Zach is the people. Yeah. Yeah. So again, our next episode will be Sunday, December 29th. So not 2 days from now, but 9 days from now will be our next episode. We'll be back for that. And then we'll talk to you the week after that for our next follow-up episode. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Everybody enjoy our break because we certainly will be. And we'll talk to you guys in a couple of weeks.
Thanks everybody. Happy holidays.
Bye guys.
All right. Well, that was clunky.
Sorry, I just got to the end. I was like, usually it's something happens that spurs more conversation on, even if I'm at the end of the comments. And then I was like, well,
yeah. By the way, did you both hit stop on your audio?
Up. I did.
No, yep. I'm about to.
Yeah. So when you were talking, I thought I heard you say that that's the last post from
Yeah.
the follow up, and then I convinced myself like I'm like, oh, certainly that's not the last one. We're only 24 minutes in,
Yeah.
and then you're like, well, that was the end of it. I'm like, oh, that is what she said. She did say that was the end of the whole thing. Oh,
Sorry.
that's fine. I'm exhausted. These kids at school are wearing me out. I'm gonna go to school tomorrow and listen to the clickety. This is hopefully I cannot mess something up here.
Yeah.
This is what I hear all hour.
Oh man, Tony, that's a good question. Sorry that we had already stopped recording.
What did he
Damn
say?
it. He says you talk about how with wrongful convictions, there's often something that goes wrong. You think with this case, there's something that went wrong, like a weird coincidence.
Hit record. Let's go.
If
I
I was
the
editing
coincidence
this,
is the
I would.
robbery. To me, the coincidence is the robbery.
It is. That's what I was gonna say. Like,
Yeah.
if it wasn't for young Erica having to handle all those audio files tomorrow morning, I would say everybody hit record again and listen.
I know. That was just a little something special for those of you who are still in here.
Yeah, I
Little
think that
tidbit.
it was I do. I think it was the robbery was the thing, and it was that I think the coincidence was that the same person that had people try to carjack him 2 days later got murdered, and I think that was the coincidence. Like everyone tried to make those two part of the same thing. You know, they blended those two together right from the very beginning, and I think that was the coincidence.
Yeah.
But it's a good point, Tony, because like you're right, because usually there's and I think Wendell Mass, our listener Wendell Mass, is the one that said he's like, if there wasn't coincidences, there wouldn't be wrongful convictions.
Yeah.
Rarely does someone just
Oh my
get
God, like Pinion Pines is like one of the mothers of all
shutting
of
their
those.
phones
Like,
off. Yeah.
ugh.
Yeah. Rarely is
Yeah.
someone just like, you know, a name pulled out of a hat and they're just like, we're going to go after this
Yeah.
person. There's always, usually it's a desperate police department or an apathetic police department that just wants to solve a case. And they're like, oh, here's a thing that we can latch onto and let's make that the thing. You know, for
Yeah.
Adnan, it was Jay Wilds.
Yeah.
You know, in Jesse's case, it was, you know, just the fact that he was, you know, in the area, and then the police targeted his brother as somebody that they could lean on to, you know, it took him however many years to get him to do it, but eventually turn him over. There's always some kind of a coincidence.
Yeah.
Oh, all right. Are you guys ready to go?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm gonna go
It's been a
warm my
long
feet
day.
up. I'm gonna
long
go
day.
outside to warm my feet up. It is warmer outside than it is in here right now.
It is. That is not the case here. It is
Yeah.
a cool 68 in here right now. It is 30 outside.
Classic Los Angeles problem.
Grayson, thanks so much for the super chat, buddy. Merry Christmas to you too. All
Thank
right,
you guys.
we are gonna end on the stream. Bye, guys. We'll talk to you later.
Bye, everybody.
Look, bye, guys. I'm talking to the microphone. The microphone's not on. Bye, guys.